Welcome back to another episode of Instant's Click to Buy podcast. I'm your host, Becca Anderson, and today, like every episode, we're going to interview an e-commerce expert to get actionable tips to help you turn clicks into customers. Today, we have a fantastic guest joining us, Jordan Carruthers, founder of Lunify, a company specialized in data-driven landing pages and CRO for health and wellness brands. Jordan's journey began back in 2018 when he launched Hood Greetings, a unique greeting card and gift brand rooted in Black British culture. After transitioning Hood Greetings from a D2C model to a print-on-demand business stocked across Europe, Jordan honed his expertise in maximizing ad efficiency through landing pages and CRO, particularly for brands with a low AOV and a niche market. Now he's leveraging all this expertise to help health and wellness brands boost their profits without increasing their ad spend. Jordan is passionate about data-driven design, personalizing the customer journey, and creating mobile-first experiences. So with a background like that, you can tell I'm excited to dive right on into his insights on designing effective online stores and landing pages for Shopify merchants and e-commerce marketers. So just to kick things off, Jordan, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be on. I've listened to a few podcast episodes and, I couldn't wait to get involved.
Absolutely. Well, just to maybe have a nice base and before we dive into all thing landing pages, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how your journey was from being a store owner and how that has shaped your current business today. So if you could tell me, what is one lesson you learned from your current experience launching Hood Greetings that you've carried into your current venture, Lunify, today?
I would say it's kind of the grit and perseverance, really. I like to call it aggressive patience, if you will, because building something from the ground up is like such a long journey, right? I think that you need
Absolutely.
I think you have to attack every day whilst accepting that things, take time, because I think we're all kind of pretty guilty, Becca, of seeing these overnight successes and thinking, they just click their fingers and, boom, everything was all set. But it's just, for the vast majority of us, it's not the way it was or the way it ever will be. So I think for me, it was kind of like at Hood Greetings, we literally had to give away our first cards, right? Because nobody would buy them. It was a disaster. But, we honed the design, honed the store, honed the branding, got everything in line. And, 5 years later, as you mentioned, we're stocked all over Europe. I'm pretty sure Amsterdam included too. So there's just that knowledge and acceptance that I'm grateful to take on board that, things take time.
Absolutely. I love that, especially how you mentioned something that I feel like is so true no matter what sort of business you're starting, like that perseverance and grit is going to take you really far because there's so many people who have these great ideas, but if you don't keep pushing through even when things are tough, you will never maybe see the product of all that hard work you've put in.
Yeah, 100%. I think ideas are good, right? But they're actually worth nothing until you actually push through and make them a reality. And I think there's examples, right, of people taking mediocre ideas and doing great things with them just because they had that perseverance and that passion to see it through.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you've put a lot of sweat equity into all of your businesses for sure. I'm really curious, how did you start to gain this expertise about building data-driven landing pages? Was this something you kind of learned while you were launching Hood Greetings, something you were already pretty familiar with?
Yeah, exactly that, right? So running Hood Greetings, you can imagine, so it's greeting cards and gifts, predominantly started out with greeting cards. So I was new to the space, new to e-commerce, started it out in my flat back in 2017. And it was, when I went to push some ads on Facebook, I realized, with these average order values, it's going to be a long slog, right? So I kind of just essentially took it upon myself to learn everything I could about, optimizing that post-click experience and really honing in on, landing pages, especially as a method to get the most amount of people through to purchase as possible.
Absolutely. So now, of course, you're helping a lot of other people with their landing pages and whatnot. What is some of the data that you use to kind of inform the design or inform the hook or way that you shape these landing pages?
Wow, so there's a lot, right? There's a lot to get to, so I'll try to keep it
Yeah,
brief.
yeah. Oh, don't
But
worry about it.
so essentially, we're looking at qualitative and quantitative data, right, to shape that
Hmm.
customer journey. For example, we're looking at Google Analytics is a great source, right?
Hmm.
So we're looking at kind of the purchase journey. What stages are the biggest area for concern? Like where are people dropping off through the funnel? Path exploration is a great one as well on
Hmm.
Google Analytics, right? Because we can see if there's anyone diving off to find purchase critical information. And it's great to have a look at the current benchmarks for conversion rates and engagement rates and engaged session times, and obviously also any user demographics. So Google Analytics for one for sure. And then also there's also that the voice of the customer is super important too.
Hmm.
Pretty early on, we want to kind of get speaking to customers, whether it's via surveys, interviews. They're great methods. So in terms of surveys, typically there's two. So post-purchase surveys. So we like to look at, why are they buying? What are their current awareness levels when they're purchasing? How do they currently feel about the problem that they were trying to solve? And
Hmm.
were there any barriers that they, potentially had to overcome other than price? Because 9 times out
Yeah.
of 10, we're not going to drop that price. And then also on the survey side, we're looking at email list surveys, right?
Hmm.
So the beauty of email list surveys is that these are people that have experienced the product for a while, right? So we get to kind of get insights into the transformation that they've experienced from using the product, how they feel after continued use of the product, and how they would describe it to a friend. I think that's a great question because often when we're looking at ideal customer profiles, they're going to know
Hmm.
similar people in that ilk, right? So once to know, how would you describe it to a friend that's facing a similar problem to you, the language that they use and things like that. And also we can speak to non-purchasers too on the email list, try and dig out any information as to why they haven't purchased as of yet.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack there already. And I love what you've already mentioned about like you're looking for pain points other than price. That's already, I think, a big key takeaway because there's so many ways that you can show value, or maybe there's just this one tiny thing that's making people hesitate. So figuring out what that is. And then I love your question, how would you describe this to a friend? I think that's something a lot of brands could think about, especially if you're trying to write kind of copy that converts. If you can use the language of the customer, that's such a powerful tool.
Yeah, exactly that, right? So I think speaking of voice of customer, I think
Hmm.
customer tickets is a great one, right? Because it's kind of like
Hmm.
almost a gold mine of all the questions that people were unable to find on the site, or they were too lazy to click right down to the FAQs and find it
Yeah.
buried somewhere at the bottom of the page, right? So these are things that potentially we need to look at, lifting up higher in the landing page experience. And then another example again is customer reviews, which is critical, right?
Hmm.
So I think one of the mistakes brands often make when they're looking at the reviews is they just pick reviews which say, "Oh, it's great, it's wonderful," but really we want those transformational impacts, right? So we want almost those, I like to call them, real life benefits. So an
Hmm.
example would be perhaps rather if it's kind of a weight loss product, rather than just saying I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks, which is it's a great impact. It's more like I feel 10 times more confident when I'm on date night. Those sorts of things that really
Yeah.
kind of resonate with that ideal customer persona.
That's a really good example as well, because, for example, like supplements or weight loss products or these sorts of benefits, like I think there's a lot to play around with messaging, and you don't really know like what's going to hit really well because maybe it is that confidence or body positivity, and maybe that's going to really hit a specific niche of your customers or something. So I think there's a lot you can play with if you can do that kind of research.
Yeah, 100% right. And I think that's the thing with when you're building out a landing page, especially if it's the first iteration. I
Hmm.
think there's, you have to test, right? You have to, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build use all the data sources to build our best first go. But the real bulk of the work comes post launching the landing page and getting the heat map data and being able to speak to customers and understand, oh, perhaps we can tweak this, change the messaging here to really find what resonates with who we're speaking to.
Absolutely. And kind of like figuring out who you're speaking to, staying on this kind of thread. Do you have any recommendations when it comes to trying to balance, like, obviously the scalability of your efforts and trying to really find these customer segments that you can personalize these landing pages for?
Yeah, so I think a big thing is looking back almost a step, right? Because what we
Uh-huh.
kind of specialize in is post-click experience, right? But if you look at the pre-click experience, then you're seeing the ad creatives that are performing well. So you're seeing what are they speaking to, what are the hooks that they're using, what are the angles, the angles that they're kind of pitching towards the ideal customer persona. I think we can start to understand what angles we can really start to leverage from a personalization perspective. But moving on to scalability, I think that's a good question, right? Because I'm huge on personalizing the customer journey, as I think it's kind of becoming pretty commonplace, right? Everyone's talking about personalization.
I actually think it's a really good point about personalization because everyone is talking about it. Everyone says you should do it, but
Yeah.
there's so many different ways that you can apply quote unquote personalization to your
Yes.
customer journey. But when it comes to landing pages, like what does that mean? Like if everyone's hearing this, like how do you kind of think about that when you're designing?
So what that means is that we're looking at the data that we've collected, right, to enable to
Hmm.
give us the best opportunity of converting that customer today, or at least as a side, if we're not converting them, then let's get their
Yeah.
email address and all that, email first, zero party data and things like that.
Hmm.
So, it's just using the data that we can really find to leverage that personalization.
Absolutely. Thinking about kind of the ways that you've collected this, do you have any tools you can recommend that you've used, like either for looking at like ads that are going to inspire these landing pages or for trying to get more insights from your customers?
So something that I've not touched on so far is kind of heat
Uh-huh.
map software. So I'm a
Oh,
big
true.
I'm a big fan of heatmap.com. So that's revenue-based heat map software, right? So rather than just
Hmm.
looking at where people are clicking, it's where people are clicking and attributes revenue data to those clicks. So there's a bit of a matrix that I like to use in terms of heat map data. For example, there's high click and high purchase rate, right? So that's the kind of stuff
Hmm.
that's really hitting home. So it might be a low priority in terms of we don't really want to do too much to it, but it's potentially an
Hmm.
area for further iteration. But then moving beyond that, there's low click, high purchase rate. So then we're looking at, all right, how do we boost the visibility of these elements or make them more engageable to really kind of get them on screen and get them digested by the visitor. And then there's obviously high click and low purchase rate. So then we're looking at, all right, if people are clicking this area, this segment, and there's a lot of interest here, then how do we make it more compelling? Is there anything that we can do to really enhance the pitch of the product at this point? And then finally, you've got low click and low purchase rate, which for me, I'm looking at, do we need this on the page? Can we eliminate it?
Absolutely, because every bit of that page is real estate. And that
Yes.
actually makes kind of a nice segue. So, something you actually mentioned earlier, kind of like looking at landing pages, desktop and mobile. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time building these really beautiful landing pages that work just fantastic on desktop. But as we know, so much of your traffic for your online store is actually coming in from like smartphones and whatnot. So, I'm really curious if you have any advice on different elements of like your landing page that you really need to make sure are like optimized for the mobile experience.
Yes, of course. So mobile nav for one. I think if you look at
Hmm.
any heat map on a site, it'll be one of the top five most interactive with elements on the page, right? So getting the
Hmm.
mobile nav is so important in terms of getting people into a shopping experience as fast as we can. So that'll be number one for sure.
Hmm.
And then when we're looking at the product page, I think, as you mentioned, right, a lot of people design these beautiful product pages on desktop because they've got all the real estate in the world to work with. But when it comes to mobile, there's padding that pushes things really, so far down the
Yeah.
page, you're not seeing them and things like that. So I like to really focus on between the top of the page and the add to cart button, because we always see a significant, drop off after that add to cart button on purchase pages. So
Hmm.
making sure that's really honed in and dialed in and getting as much, quality and relevant content in as possible. And then I think the final one I would say is the cart page as well. Again, people build out these cart pages that look brilliant on desktop, but perhaps the checkout button is buried underneath piles of products when you built a bundle. Just small things
Yeah.
like that can really affect your conversion rate.
I think that's a really good point. And those are all three really essential things to think about, of course, as a whole, when you're thinking about like a mobile page design. I am curious, since I know you've designed and worked with a lot of landing pages, if you have any examples of something that's like worked really well in the health and wellness space or in general, like something you've designed that you've seen was pretty effective for a client.
Yeah, sure. Let me just pop it up.
Absolutely.
So if you're with me here. So what we've got here is
Yes.
it's a de-bloating product. So it's a supplement
Mm-hmm.
that helps with bloating, particularly aimed at women. So what we wanted to do here is we've got a few things in this section. We wanted to kind of first of all give the feeling of feeling lighter. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where we've got clouds in the background to really emphasize that feeling of feeling lighter, feeling area, if that's a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but you get that sense
Yeah.
of feeling lighter, right? And then rather than focusing on features, we're focusing on the benefits, these real life benefits that customers are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. So, for example, it says, regain your freedom from the bloat. So, feel great in every outfit, comfort
Mm-hmm.
throughout your cycle, traveling comfort, and enjoy meals without fear. So, these are all pain points that we picked up from our customer research, right? So, by doing these surveys, speaking to customers, we can start to understand, right, what is the feeling of bloating for these women that we're trying to sell to, and how
Mm-hmm.
can we, promote these transformational benefits that the products can have.
Absolutely. I love the kind of the different icons as well that you can already get like a little bit of a sense here of like kind of four key reasons why someone would maybe this could help like alleviate a problem in your life. And also the copy at the top of the page, enjoy life without fear. Like it kind of all fits together really well. And there's something about like the everything floating on top of the clouds, which is a lot more of a light feeling than a bloated feeling. So definitely can see where you're going with this.
Thank you. No, yeah, exactly what we're going for on that.
And I see you also kind of have the rule of three here on the sides with like the three little, like, these are three things that are going to happen if you use this with the reduces water retention, soothes inflammation, eases digestion. I think it's very visually pleasing.
Yes. Yeah. So rule of three is a great one, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
when we're looking at copy, we want to look at rhythm and how people are reading it. I think, one of the common mistakes people can make on a landing page when they're writing copy is not
Mm-hmm.
writing for the audience. If we've got a landing page that's kind of more of a, we want to optimize for scannability. So we don't want huge paragraphs of text. We want to keep it all bullet points, unless, of course, we're going down the advertorial angle where we know we're aiming towards a specific persona who wants to know every
Mm-hmm.
little detail, right? I think you can almost bucket your customer segments into, scanners and kind of diggers, right? People that really want to know
Mm-hmm.
every little bit about your product before they purchase. These are the people that are going to be buried in your FAQs, kind of finding every
Mm-hmm.
little ingredient, right? And we want to kind of be able to optimize for both, but we can only do that by understanding who's going to go to which part of the page, right? And where we're going to send this traffic to.
Absolutely. I'm curious, especially since you've worked with a variety of health and wellness brands. Have you seen certain products that attract more of like these diggers just based on the type of customer? Like for example, I had someone else on the podcast. Actually, I think it was our first podcast episode, Rishi, who's like also really into designing landing pages, and he said like for some products they built like these accordions that was like if you want the short version, read this, the long version, read this. And so this was the first time I really heard of this kind of diggers versus skimmers, but I can imagine maybe this is something super relevant in a space where some sort of health products, you need to know everything. Other things, it's a bit more obvious.
Yes. So I think a big consideration for this is
Hmm.
awareness levels, right? So
Hmm.
if we're looking at supplements in particular, there's some products which don't need any explanation. So an example would be a protein powder. By now, if you're selling a protein powder online, everyone knows what it does, right? So you can have little
Yeah.
tweaks that are going to be different, but the basis of the product doesn't need explaining. But on the other end of the scale, it might be something new to the market. I'm trying to think, mushrooms is kind of one that's, for example, right?
True.
A lot of mushroom brands that are up and coming right now. But if you take that back to kind of 2 years ago, people weren't drinking mushroom coffee. It's like, why do I want mushrooms in my coffee, right? So
Yeah.
that's when you need to do a lot more explaining and, a lot more education, right? So
Hmm.
that's how I would differentiate between the two.
I think that's a really good example, especially with like mushroom-based products. I've looked at this lately because I just wrote a case study about space goods, and I think that's an interesting example because they have to communicate, yes, we're like mushrooms, here are the health benefits, but it's also like a beverage. So it's like trying to fit in kind of a couple different verticals in a way that's easy to understand. So I can imagine indeed when it's something people are less familiar with, trying to make it relatable
Yes,
is
exactly.
more of the challenge.
It is, yes. And I think that's, a mistake that some people, some brands
Mm-hmm.
make, right? They try to speak to too many different types of people at the same time. That's where
Mm-hmm.
obviously, landing pages come in, right? Because we can personalize that experience and tailor it to whoever we're targeting. So rather than trying to appeal to people that know everything about mushroom coffee already,
Mm-hmm.
we can do an educational advertorial piece. And then for the people that know everything about it, we just need to send them to an offer page because we just need to kind of prime them ready to purchase.
Absolutely. Maybe that's also a nice follow-up is do you have different kind of strategies that you help when you work with brands when it's coming to like retargeting for like customers that you're trying to retain versus like new traffic? Or is typically most of the landing pages you're designing just going for like new customers only?
So I'd say new customers is kind of the most common
Okay.
segment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody loves
Mm-hmm.
growth, right? But there is
Yes.
definitely there is space for current customers, and that's where in fact something that we're looking at the minute coming into Black Friday is bundling, right? So
Mm.
build your own bundle pages. So that's a big one for people that know the brand. Then they know it inside out. They love your products, but bundle
Mm-hmm.
pages are great for increasing that product exploration discovery, right? So introducing
Mm-hmm.
your core fans to new product lines and new flavors, and
Mm-hmm.
start to get them to really hook into other areas of your product lineup.
That is a great segue because the last episode we recorded was actually all about product bundles. So by the time you're listening to this, hopefully, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to that episode. But I am curious for your take, Jordan, on what sort of bundles you'll be thinking about when you're helping people design their pages for Black Friday or busy sales periods.
Okay, so bundle pages.
Yes.
So I love gift with purchase. That is my favorite when it comes to Black Friday, because I think
Mm-hmm.
looking from a holistic point of view, right, looking from the top down from a brand owner's perspective, you don't want to train your customers into always thinking discounts, discounts, discounts,
True.
because throughout the year suddenly you're training your customers to wait for these discount periods. So
Mm-hmm.
by being able to offer bundles with that activate gifts with purchases, it's a great way to obviously, one, throw in products which might be slow movers, but two, it kind of makes customers feel that they're not necessarily shopping because of discount. They're getting something extra for their money.
True. I think that's a good way of also dealing with that pain of paying, you know? They only have so much they're going to want to spend during like any big sales period, but especially with Black Friday now stretching so much longer, everyone's starting earlier, everyone's pulling it longer. Like you have to find some ways to stand out if they're considering you versus someone else, but also without devaluing your own um, brand because some brands just doesn't make sense to do like a 35, 50% site-wide discount. You know, if you can find something that's actually valuable, which it sounds like through what you were saying, getting to know your customer and what they want and what they're interested in, that's going to help a lot.
Of course, I mean, of course, I'm a big advocate on data, right? But I really think
Yeah,
data
yeah.
can drive your new product development, things like that. If you really understand and know your customer, it's easy to develop gifts that complement your core offering and make it even better. So it's a great thing to get hooked into.
Absolutely. I'm also curious, especially because you've seen things from brand side, now also with Lunify, with helping other brands out there. Do you have any tips when it comes to store owners who they really want to optimize their store, they want to get a lot more traffic, they don't want to have a super big increase on their ad spend? Like if there's any tactics or techniques they can use to try to optimize and draw in that traffic for brands more on a budget?
Yeah, I would say blow the dust off your GA4. That's what I would say. I mean, I think I've
All
encountered
right.
so many brand owners, right, that just don't want anything to do with that Google Analytics dashboard. Head into that purchase journey report, because the purchase journey report, it breaks down the customer journey into miniature funnels, so you can filter
Hmm.
by your largest source of traffic, the device that they're on, which is probably going to be mobile, right? Most people are coming in on
Hmm.
mobile, and looking at your hero product as well. And then you can start to look at your individual funnels. So from session start to view product, from view product to add to cart, from cart to begin checkout, and checkout to purchase. So really hone in on those funnels and understand, right, where are we underperforming, where are we overperforming, and that's where you should start your optimization, right? I think if you're a brand owner on a budget and you're just thinking, I want to optimize the site, there's a million things you can go at. There's cart
Hmm.
pages, there's your checkout, there's your home page, there's your product page. If you try
Hmm.
and do everything at once, you're never going to get anywhere. So you really need to use your data to understand and identify where you should be looking at optimizing first. And then once you understand where the issue is, then you can start ideating and coming up with ideas and optimizing that area of your funnel.
Absolutely. I think that was really well said, especially if you're listening in and you feel lost, you just feel like everything could be optimized. Well, it sounds like everything could be optimized, but you have to look for where is it going to make the biggest impact in your customer experience.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I've been there as a brand owner, right? Everyone's so fixated with conversion rates, right? And conversion rates
Yes.
is half the story. Really you want to be, optimizing for profit, right? So profit, I mean, you can dial that back to revenue per session, right? And that involves average order value as well. So don't forget about average order value when you're looking at, optimizing your site. Think about how do we introduce, product discovery at the right points. Not to introduce friction into the journey, but exploration is not necessarily a bad thing for that holistic long-term view.
And just thinking about how do you kind of introduce the right elements at the right point. I think that's also going back to like bundles or like a cross sell, why sometimes that can be so important to really evaluate like that real estate on a PDP or a landing page, because something like the shop pay or a button could be super convenient for getting that conversion rate up, but maybe you're missing out on a ton of potential AOV if you had just like a little recommendation just to complete the order before they click on that button.
Yeah, 100% right. It's all about holistics. I think the thing with data,
Yeah.
you can skew it in any way that you want to, right? If you're looking purely at conversion rate and reducing friction and doing everything from A to B as fast as possible, you can miss out
hmm
on these touch points, which over time can build up and really start to, help you scale in the long term.
Absolutely. Well, Jordan, it's been such a pleasure picking your brain on all things landing page design. But before I let you go, I have to know, of course, this is click to buy. So I'm asking for your click-worthy tip. So what would be your piece of advice or short motivational quote for other brand owners out there or e-commerce marketers who are looking to improve their customer journey?
Stop blindly following best practices is my pet peeve, right? I think
Yes.
we're in an era where everyone's sharing, great design work and great
hmm
features, but you really need to look at your data to find where those points of optimization should be prioritized.
Absolutely. I think that's really well said. I think you can always look at what's out there as inspiration, but it should match what you actually need to do. So, okay, we've decided this sort of offer is what we want to give to our customers. Now we can look for inspiration from other brands, but not always the other way around. Because you don't want to just copy and paste. You might get some clicks, but it's not maybe going to be the impact you could have if you take this kind of data-driven, research-driven approach you've mentioned, I think, in this episode.
Yeah, definitely the case.
Well, I'm sure I could talk to you for another half hour, but unfortunately, I don't have the time. So, in case other people are listening in and they want more tips from you, they want to see some of your landing page designs or learn more about you and your business, where's the best place people can find you online?
Thanks, Becca. It's been a pleasure to be on. So LinkedIn is where you'll mainly find me. Jordan Carruthers, Lunify. So I'm sure there'll be a link in the description where you'll be able to
Absolutely.
find me. But yeah, that's where
Absolutely.
you'll find me living most of the time, posting great, tips and insights in what I'm learning on the journey as well.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have that linked. So if you're listening in, be sure to check that out if you want some more info. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Click to Buy. A big thank you again to Jordan for sharing all your process on creating these data-driven landing pages. Once again, I'm your host, Becca Anderson, coming to you from Instant Page Builder. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, share it with everyone you know. And until next time, keep turning those clicks into buys.